the proposed symphysiotomy redress scheme. Deputies Caoimhghín and Seán Crowe raised this issue. Deputy Caoláin.
Minister, the symphysiotomy payment scheme is due to close, I understand, in some 8 days' time. Yet victims of hepatitis C in the residential institutions had 3 years to apply for compensation. And the redress scheme for the Magdalene women had no closing date for applications. Yet in this instance, the survivors of symphysiotomy have got an incredible and unprecedented 20 days. Now, it has been said, and you have responded to me already, that late applications will be considered, but at the discretion of the assessor, Judge Maureen Harding-Clark. At the discretion of. That's in marked contrast to the other instances that I've cited, and yet there are no appeals allowed. We have to recognise that there are women out there who still do not know that they were subjected to this horrific procedure. There are women out there who cannot yet bring themselves emotionally to come forward. There are women also who are operated on in this country, subjected to this procedure, and who have since immigrated. There are women without records, and there are women suffering from dementia. All of these are entitled to a caring and an inclusive consideration. Minister, this redress scheme is, quite frankly, pathetic. It's a pathetic effort, it's cold and it's callous, and that is the view of a number of the women with whom I have spoken. It is designed to force acceptance of its terms by women who are already weary, they are aged, they are, many of them, in ill health, and knowing that if they do not accept your terms, their entitlements die with them. It is a shameful way to treat innocent women who have already been so cruelly treated, and I urge that at the very least you arrange for the extension of time of notice of application to present to 3 years, in line with the other instances that I've cited, and not the insulting and outrageous 20 days that currently is the case. As I've said in conclusion, last count Cordia, the scheme is set to close at the end of next week. Will you act now?
Good morning, Deputy Seán Crowe. 2 minutes also.
Good morning. Again, Minister, just to follow on from the colleague here in relation to it, it's the narrow parameters of the actual scheme itself. You might, if you get an opportunity, to maybe explain why you went down this route. The women themselves have been waiting years. I think we'd all accept that. We'd all accept that they were butchered, that it was this twisted theory that women could continue on having baby after baby, year after year, and so on, which was a connivance of the medical profession and the acquiescence of the state. So we accept that, and I suppose people sighed a relief when they heard the scheme. But when they start looking at what you were actually proposing then, and the short period, again, people are questioning why is that in relation to. One of the difficulties some of the women are saying is that, first of all, is specialist medical report. The difficulty is, for some of them, is how will they access this? My colleague talked in terms of some of those women who are going to have difficulty getting into the scheme itself. But how do you get those specialist medical reports if you're poor, if you don't have money, if you don't have access to money in relation to that? So it's one of the questions, I think, if you can answer maybe in some of your questions in relation to. There hasn't been really a really active debate on it. I don't understand the timeline, as I was saying. The scheme itself, only medical consultants will give such a report. State-appointed doctors will not, as well as being pro-government in their knowledge of symphysiotomy and its side effects. It's also likely to be nil in relation to them coming forward and with giving that evidence. The scheme is not paying for the independent medical reports. So I'm making the point it's an attack on less well-off women. The scheme is also flawed procedurally, and these basically make a veto into the UN, contrary to what the Human Rights Committee recommended. The scheme offers no individualised assessment, nor any right of appeal. Again, Minister, why is this? We're looking at other schemes, and I think one of the things that we achieved in the past, you know, by addressing some of these wrongs, were that we left people out of the schemes. You know, I think there's a general agreement again. If you leave people behind, you're compounding that hurt. And my worry in relation to this, it's going to be something the same. So it's a paper scheme, and no oral hearing, and there's no right of appeal of any kind against the decision made by the assessor. People are asking why.
Minister, 4 minutes to reply.
Thanks very much. The surgical symphysiotomy payment scheme commenced on the 10th of November. The government has agreed that the scheme will also include payments for the small number of women who have had a pubiotomy. The scheme is designed to be simple, straightforward and non-adversarial, and aims to minimise the stress for the women concerned. Many are elderly and may not want to experience the delay, publicity and financial risks that sometimes come with a court case. I met the 3 support groups representing the women last September, and their views helped to shape this scheme. The scheme is supported by 2 of those 3 groups. Judge Maureen Harding-Clark, a retired High Court judge, has been appointed as the independent assessor for the scheme. Judge Clark, from her previous work on the Lourdes Hospital Redress scheme, brings valuable experience to the role of determining the appropriate level of award for each individual. The symphysiotomy scheme is open to women who are still living and who underwent a surgical symphysiotomy or pubiotomy in the state between the years of 1940 and 1990, although we've no evidence of any procedures occurring after 1984. Awards of 50,000, 100,000 and 150,000 will be offered. It's not a requirement to retain a solicitor to make an application. However, the scheme makes provision for applicants to have legal and other advice available to them in preparing to submit an application if they wish. Applications must be made within 20 working days of the commencement date, which was the 10th of November 2014. The closing date, therefore, is Friday the 5th of December 2014. In exceptional circumstances, Judge Clark has discretion to extend the time for the receipt of applications by an additional 20 working days, that is to Wednesday the 14th of January. I don't think it's necessary to extend the closing date for the scheme at this time. It's important to say that in the event of a delay arising from the compilation of an applicant's supporting documentation due to a difficulty obtaining medical records, as Deputy Crowe alluded to, the application may be submitted with an explanation of the reasons for the absence of the application. So it's still possible to make an application, even if it's not been possible to put together the medical records at the time. The details of this provision are set out in the terms and conditions of the scheme on the scheme's website. The judge reported that by last Thursday, more than 60 women had applied for awards under the scheme. There are 8 working days left to apply, and I urge every eligible applicant or her representative to submit her application within the appointed timeframe. My department will be making payments in the case of 7 women shortly, and others should have their payments before Christmas. The scheme, as you know, is a voluntary one, and I want to emphasise that women do not waive their rights to take cases to the court as a precondition to participating in the scheme. They may opt out of the scheme at any stage in the process, up to the point at which they accept their award. And it's only on accepting the offer that a woman must agree to discontinue her legal proceedings against any party arising out of symphysiotomy or pubiotomy. The government hopes that the implementation of this scheme will help bring a resolution on this issue for the women concerned and their families. I should also point out that the assessor and her team are willing to assist and advise any applicants or survivors in getting their paperwork together. And I should point out as well that if somebody doesn't want to accept the award that they're offered, they can of course take their case to the courts and have their individual case assessed as to whether medical negligence is proven and an award is justified.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Caoimhghín.
Ask Caoimhghín. Minister, you talk about in exceptional circumstances that Judge Clark has discretion to extend the time for receipt of applications by an additional, hear me, 20 working days. That is up to the 14th of January 2015. Can I ask you, Minister, because I don't believe that your hand is entirely across all of this. I believe that some of this most certainly was devised before you took up the health portfolio. Why would you believe that these very restrictive opportunities have been laid down in this particular case regarding this particular cohort of victims? I believe that it compares terribly with the state's position in relation to the other cases that I've instanced, Hep C, the residential institutions, the Magdalen laundries? Minister, it really is intolerable that this is the situation that applies. And even if Judge Clark were to apply her discretion, it's only an additional 20 days. I have in my opening contribution to this topical issue opportunity instanced a number of possible situations that can arise where women might not be able to present to take up the offer of the terms of this redress scheme.
Thank you, Deputy.
Would you please explain to me why you believe it is necessary to apply such a restrictive time frame in this instance? And lastly, would you please, and I'm asking you sincerely here, to reconsider this particular element to allow more time? Thank you.
Deputy Seán Crowe.
Yeah, I asked you the question about the independent and medical reports. You know, those women who are coming from a poorer background that don't have the money to get them. How do they actually do that within that time period they are actually outlining here today if they don't have money? It's a fair question. I don't think it's been addressed by the scheme itself. You're saying there's other possibilities for people to do, but in relation to that, I don't think hopefully you will have an answer there in relation. And I agree with my colleague that the narrow parameters of the scheme, by its nature, is going to further compound the hurt and the insult that many people feel in relation to. The assessor is also sort of misleadingly, and I'll just be interested in your view on it. It was never about money itself, but the assessor is sort of giving the impression that most of the women will get 100,000. But I think there's nothing could be further from the truth in relation to that. The way the scheme is set out, 96% of the survivors, if they will apply, will get possibly 50,000 for a lifelong disability. The higher sums will be payable only where a significant disability lasting for 3 years or more can be shown to be directly attributable to the operation of symphysiotomy.
Thank you, Deputy.
And the chance of proving this in medical reports within the guideline. So the difficulty again is that you're looking for really specialised reports. That's going to cost money, and in some cases people are going to have to go outside the state. And I'm asking you, how are those people going to do that aren't in that position, that have financial wherewithal?
Look, you may not believe it, but the idea here genuinely is to bring about a resolution and to draw a close to an issue that has been going on for far too long, and it's to help women to come to a resolution. The assessor and her team are there to help the survivors, to help them to get the award and to get the higher award if possible. And actually, in my view, I think most of the women will actually get the higher award, because the definition of severe disability in the scheme is 3 years of symptoms, including things like instability in walking, back pain, and so on. And if you've met some of the women, it's evident that in a very large number of cases, they have had such a disability and will therefore qualify for the higher award, and I think most of them will. When it comes to issue of the medical reports, I'll certainly check up on that. My understanding is that the vast majority of survivors already have reports. Over 150 of them have cases or had cases before the courts, and of course others have records from their GP, from consultants, and were offered a service, I think, in CAPA in the past, the service of a consultant, urologist, consulting gynecologist, triple assessment, and that was offered in the past. I don't see why anyone would have to travel outside of the state, quite frankly, for such an assessment. But I'll certainly check up on that issue. I wouldn't like it to be the case that anyone lost their opportunity to apply because they couldn't get a medical assessment of some sort.
That's again, they seem to be excluded under the scheme.
They're not excluded.
No, they're not excluded, but it's very, very narrow and definite how they actually can apply for the scheme itself. That's again the understanding of many of the groups. Yeah,
if somebody is demented to the point that they don't have mental capacity, somebody can make the application on their behalf.
Thank you. I have to wrap up this now. That's the conclusion of time.